2 years after the success of The Crooked Man, game developer Uri published another game in the Strangeman Anthology series titled The Sandman. It tells the story of a girl named Sophie Grundler who suffered from insomnia. One night, she noticed something odd going on with all the clocks in the town itself, which led her to discover a plan made by a fairy known as the Sandman who decided to put the whole world to sleep forever. Being the only one who wasn't affected, she decided to stop the Sandman's evil plan before it's too late.
Let me tell you a scary story. The terrifying story of the Sandman, who hates children and eats their eyes out.
The game began with Sophie Grundler, a girl suffering from insomnia trying to fall asleep but failed yet again. Morning came and she got up to get dressed for school. Her father left her a note on the table telling her that he won't be back home because of work, so he left her with some money and told her to lock the doors and not to leave the stove on. He also mentioned that Sister Mary from her school asked him to see her, but he was too busy with work, so he asked Sophie instead to tell her that he couldn't come because of work. Sophie made her way to school, where here we see her getting bullied by a girl named Reagan. A pretty dumb insult considering it came from someone who had golden hair. The bullying continued with one of Reagan's friend, the black bitch. The black hair girl kept insulting her even more, but despite the insult, Sophie didn't do anything and just let it go on. Suddenly, Sister Mary came in asking for Sophie to come to the office to see her and immediately leaving afterward. Sophie got up to get out of the class, but then this blonde bitch made her trip. She glared at her while Reagan's friend laughed it off. This obviously irritated her, but she just left. Not long after that, Anna, a classmate of her, decided to follow her. She calls out to Sophie, telling her to not pay too much attention to Reagan and her antics. Sophie replies that she doesn't mind being an outlet for her. Anna then reassured her that she is always on her side since Sophie is her only friend. Sophie replies in a sort of a condescending tone and excuses herself to go and see Sister Mary. When she got there, Sister Mary praises Sophie for having an excellent grade and being a model student. She then asked her if she already resolved her sleeping issue. Sophie said no and told her that it's been 10 days since she couldn't sleep. Sister Mary was surprised how she was able to stay that long and asked her if she had gone to the hospital. Sophie said no since it's going to cost money. The sister looked worried, but Sophie reassured her that she's going to be fine. She then excused herself to attend a sermon. I forgot to mention here that Sophie attended an all-girl Catholic school, so attending a sermon and doing prayer are something she must do every day. When she got home, it was fairly late and she immediately went to shower before going to bed. In the shower room, we can see that Sophie had an awful look on her face, bags under her eyes because she hadn't slept for over a week now. How this girl managed to stay sane after 72 hours is beyond our understanding. Anyways, Sophie was ready to go to sleep, but before that, she remembers that her late mother often told her to say her prayer before going to sleep, but she haven't done that ever since her mother died. So for once, she tried to pray again, hoping that something might change, but after she's done praying, things are still the same. Or are they? In the middle of the night, Sophie felt something weird. She looked at the clock in her room and saw that it stopped at 12 midnight. She thought that it was broken until she saw every clock in her house stop at exactly 12 AM. What's even weirder is that when she exited her house, she saw her neighbor laying on the ground. Thinking that he might be dead, she approached him cautiously, only to discover that he only had been sleeping. She tried calling 911 but no one answers. And it's not just her neighbor, the whole townspeople fell asleep, as if a sleeping spell was cast upon them. But even so, Sophie thinks there could be someone awake out there. She took the town map not too far from where she's at and wandered off. Eventually, after wandering off town, she came to the central park where a shadowy figure approached her and calls out her name. When she turns around, that person is none other than David, whom you might remember from The Crooked Man. Sophie was relieved to see another person awake, and it's someone that she knew very well. David explained that he was working overtime, and when he went home, he noticed everyone suddenly fell asleep. He suggested both of them to go look out for more people in case some of them were awake. Sophie declines the offer since she wanted to go look for her friend Anne, who might be awake, and if she is, then she could be terrified on her own. David suggests that he come with her, but Sophie told her that her school is an all-girls school, so it doesn't allow guys to enter, which doesn't make sense in that situation, but since Sophie is strongly against it, David relented and let her go. He told her to meet him in the park when she found her friend and then said goodbye. When she got to the school, Sophie found out that the latch on the inside kept the gate firmly shut. She was expecting that since it's already midnight, so instead, she came up with a plan to climb the wall. Using the ladder that she found in a hut not too far from the school, she climbed the wall to get to the other side, but here, she faced another problem. The school's door is locked as well. Since she didn't have the time to find a key, she instead brute forced her way into the school by damaging the lock with a shovel that she found nearby. When she got in, she immediately searched for Anne in her dorm room on the second floor, but she didn't find her there at all. Sophie wondered where she could be at this time since everything is locked in the school. Then she remembers that the chapel is the only place in this school where it was never locked because the sister wanted people to pray there at any time. Sophie made her way to the chapel where she found Anne cowering behind the large cross. She was relieved to see her and told her that she's getting her out of this place because something weird is happening in this town. Anne refuses to go because she's afraid they will chase her again. This confuses Sophie because she didn't know who is it that she was talking about. Sophie reassured her that her friend will protect her from whatever danger, and after persuading her, Anne agrees. As they were about to leave, a shadowy figure appeared in front of Anne, and then 3 more after that, surrounding her. Maybe this is what she's talking about. Sophie demanded the shadow figure to let go of Anne. The shadowy figure called Anne a liar and asked Sophie why should they release her. The figure then concluded that Sophie is also a liar and must be punished, so they took Anne, hid her within the school, and told Sophie that she only had a limited time to find her before they killed her. Sophie frantically searched for Anne, asking every shadow for her location, but no matter what she asked, all of them told her lies. Eventually, Sophie figured out where Anne was hidden because the shadow, despite telling her lies, never mentioned one place, and that is the cafeteria. Without wasting any time, Sophie found Anne in the kitchen where she's surrounded by 4 shadow figures who kept calling her a liar. When they saw Sophie, the shadow figure disappeared. Sophie then told Anne that now is the time to leave, but before they got out, one shadow figure came back. This became a breaking point for Anne and she runs away. Sophie couldn't believe what just happened. After all what she did, Anne would just leave her like that. She decided to leave the school since Anne is probably fine. Sophie then had a flashback of the time where she helped Anne with her study in the library. She apologized for not being able to help her when she got bullied. Sophie said it's fine, but she knew deep down she wishes that Anne would have the courage to help her. Suddenly, her name was called out and she snapped out of it. David asked her if she found her friend, to which Sophie said yes and told him everything. David then suggests that both of them should stick together this time since who knows what kind of danger they will face. Sophie thought otherwise and suggested they split up to cover more ground. David didn't agree to it at first but then gave in to her suggestion since it does sound reasonable. He then asked her where she was going next and Sophie replied that she is going to search the mall to see if anyone was awake there. When she got to the mall, Sophie found it locked with a passcode. Looking at the security lock closely, she found out that it was made by a company called Safety Guard. Sophie remembers earlier while she was wandering around, she found a car that was parked not too far from the mall that had a logo Safety Guard on it. She immediately went to the car's location and after confirming that the person inside is indeed asleep, she went in. Inside the car, Sophie searched his pocket for the security card and found one. She returned to the mall and keyed in the passcode to enter the place. Once inside, Sophie explored the first floor but couldn't find anyone except for a loud doll that surprises her. She continued on until she got to the 3rd floor theater area. She then heard someone talking inside Theater B and was excited to think that someone was awake in this situation. She peeked through the door to see inside and what she saw horrifies her. Inside, rows of soldiers were lining up while a general was giving a speech on the stage. But what's even more surprising was that on that stage, she can see Reagan being tied up. The general then issued a command saying that Reagan must be punished with death and the punishment would commence exactly 30 minutes from now. Sophie couldn't believe what she's hearing. She knew that Reagan was a bully, but for her to die like that would be a bit too extreme. The soldiers are then dismissed and went on patrol. Sophie couldn't let herself be seen, so she quickly hides inside the staff room. Luckily, the room she's in is connected to the backstage area where Reagan was. Quietly crawling her way to help Reagan, she tried to untie the rope, but it was too tight. Sophie went back into the staff room to see if she can find something sharp to cut the rope. She found a cutter and using that item, she cuts the rope and frees Reagan. When they got to a safe distance, Sophie asked Reagan how she got caught in the first place and Reagan replied that she was just sleeping when she ended up in that situation. Sophie was confused by that answer but brushed it aside and told her to follow her so that they could escape this place. Reagan said no and would rather wait in the mall for her mom to come since they own this place and her mom would definitely come to save her. At this point, Sophie was ready to give up, but then she remembered something from way back her childhood. Apparently, Reagan and Sophie used to be good friends, with Reagan always following Sophie because she always comforted her whenever her parents had a fight. When the flashback ended, Sophie called Reagan a crybaby, something that Reagan used to do when she was a kid. The two got into an argument where eventually Reagan agrees to follow Sophie to safety. Using the cardboard box that fall down conveniently right in front of them, Sophie had an idea to use it as a cover from being spotted by the enemy. She used it to carefully navigate her way down the mall. This works perfectly as the soldier doesn't seem to notice them. They got as far as the ground floor where here, they faced a problem. The floor is filled with soldiers. Not even the cardboard box could hide them here. Sophie think hard on what she could do here, and then she remembered that earlier when she tried to go up the escalator, she found a doll that surprises her with a loud noise. She realized that this can be used as a distraction, so she throws the doll far away from the location. It made a noise which captured all the soldiers' attention. Sophie then used this opportunity to run, but as they run down the escalator, a loud gunshot is heard, making Reagan scream in fear. This attracted the soldiers' attention to them, and they immediately chase both of them. When she's certain that both of them are safe, Sophie slowed down and took a deep breath. She excitedly told Reagan that they have escaped, but as she turned around, Reagan was nowhere to be found. She concluded that she must have separated from her during the run. Sophie wanted to go back there, but knowing that it's dangerous to go there alone, she decided to ask for David's help instead. She went to their meetup place and saw that David is already there waiting for her. Immediately, she told David everything. David was taken aback by this, so he told her to calm down and explain it to him slowly. After telling David what exactly happened, he reassured her that her friend likely got away safely, so she shouldn't push herself too hard. David kindly told her that he's worried about her since she always had this pained look in her face. This triggers a flashback where Sophie remembers that she was bullied by Reagan and lost her money. She was feeling hungry that day, but she could only afford an ice cream, so she tried her best to hold it out. But hunger got the best of her, and with the last remaining money that she had, she bought the ice cream. She got out of the store, she bumped into David and her ice cream fell. David apologized for not paying attention and offered to buy her a new one. Sophie declined the offer, but David insisted on repaying her. In the end, David took her out to eat and listened to her problem, and since he can relate to her, the two became good friends. When the flashback ended, David asked if he had seen her father and urged her to find him to see if he's okay or not. Sophie was reluctant and said that she's worried about her friends, but David suggested that she go look for her father while he find those two missing people. Eventually, Sophie agrees and make her way to her father's workplace. When she got there, she found the door locked with a card reader. Since she can't brute force her way this time, she decided to leave the place after examining the picture of the employee of the month. As she wandered off in town trying to come up ways to enter the building, she got into the subway where she saw a familiar looking person sleeping on the other side of the locked gate. It's none other than the employee of the month guy. After opening the gate, Sophie searched his pocket and found an employee card, which she then used it on the card reader in her father's workplace to enter. Sophie made her way to the third floor where she enters her father's office. She looked around but couldn't find him anywhere. When Sophie got to his desk, he saw that he had a picture of her when she was a kid. She then remembers that one time where her father just came back home from work and she tries to get his attention despite her father feeling tired. She then remembered that she made a selfish request to her father to take her somewhere. Her father was too tired at that time, but he promised to take her out that weekend. Sophie then asked if her father is drinking juice, which her father said no. A few seconds later, he coughed up blood and had to be rushed to the hospital. It then switched to Sophie in the hospital overhearing her aunt talking about how her father had overworked himself. We then see her inside her father's room, apologizing to her father for being selfish and promising to him that she won't do it anymore. When her flashback ended, Sophie was determined to find her father. She set her goal to the meeting room as that is the only place where her father could have gone to if he's not at the office. When she enters the meeting room on the top floor, she found her father bursting out of the end of the room and was surprised to see Sophie. Sophie was relieved to see him, but that was cut short as her father told her to run away because it is coming. A few seconds later, a dragon burst into the office. If there was ever any doubt that she's in a dream, this would be the evidence because a dragon appearing just didn't make any sense. Either way, both of them runs away from the dragon. As they got close to the exit, her father tripped and fell. Sophie tried to help him, but her father, not wanting to see his daughter become a sacrifice, told her to run instead. The dragon let out a roar that pushed Sophie out of the building, knocking her tooth out. The impact of that roar injured her, but she was more worried about her father. She enters the building again, but was surprised to see that everything was not in flames. There's no dragon. Sophie slumped down. She wondered if she's in a nightmare because there's no way she could explain everything anymore. Frustrated and confused, she got out of the building to meet with David. When she got to the meeting place, David was not even there. She must have been really early, so she decided to wait for him, but then suddenly, out of the corner of her eyes, she saw a shadowy figure. Since David is not there yet, she decided to follow it, thinking it might lead to something. The shadow took her to Shirley's apartment. Shirley is David's fiancée, and when Sophie entered the apartment, she saw David sleeping. This raises a question because if David is sleeping here, then who was it that she was interacting the whole time? Sophie, upon learning this truth, confronted the fake David. The fake David tried denying it and insisting that he's the real deal, but Sophie already knew that he lied the moment he said that he had no one to look for except for Sophie. The fake David finally gave in and revealed to her his true identity. Lullaby, a creation of the Sandman. He told her that all of this was a plot by the Sandman who put everyone to sleep with a special sand. Sophie didn't believe him at first, but then he revealed that everything that she encountered were all set up by him. The soldier, the dragon, everything was him. He has the ability to shapeshift. Lullaby then revealed further that the Sandman intend to put everyone to sleep, but then he encountered a problem. Some humans are immune to that. These humans are known as insomniacs. They can't sleep because they are uneasy, angry, and impatient. So to counter that, he created Lullaby to grant their desire, and once they are granted, the person will finally be able to sleep. Sophie was in disbelief because all the things that she had been experiencing were not putting her at ease at all. In fact, she felt like she was in a nightmare. Lullaby then asked why is she lying to herself when deep down that is exactly what she wanted. She wanted Anne to be condemned as a liar because she never helped her despite worrying about her. She wanted revenge against Reagan and publicly humiliate her in front of everyone. And lastly, she wanted her father's workplace burned down so that he'll pay more attention to her. In a way, Lullaby tried to grant those wishes to her. Sophie had enough. She knew that's the truth, but she didn't want that exactly. She then demanded Lullaby to take her to the Sandman to stop his evil plan and wake everyone up. Lullaby agrees and brought Sophie to the Sandman's world. When she got to the Sandman's world, Lullaby is nowhere to be seen. He left her all alone in the forest. Sophie had to navigate her way through the forest where if she took a wrong path, it will bring her back to the beginning. Eventually, she managed to pass through it all and ends up in a swamp-like area where she heard someone singing. As she moves through the swamp, a creature suddenly appeared, almost grabbing her had she not stayed far away from the swamp's edge. This creature is Nixie and she's a resident in the Sandman's world. She apologized for almost grabbing Sophie and told her that even though she likes pulling humans into the swamp, she didn't like girls because according to her, they are not tasty at all. However, Sophie did ruin her mood, so in order for her to pass through, she asked Sophie to give her a gold coin. Sophie wondered how is she going to get a gold coin in the first place. She was out of ideas until she enters an old house not too far from Nixie. Apparently, this is the house of the Tooth Fairy, and knowing that he accepts tooth, Sophie remembers that she picked up her own tooth back then. She offered it to the Tooth Fairy but he declined, saying that he only accepts baby tooth. Sophie was confused about how she was going to get that. She tried asking Nixie about it, and while she didn't offer anything useful, she did mention about a grass called tibion grass, which had an effect on making them smooth and young. While it's a long shot, Sophie decided to try it either way. She returned to the maze-like forest to find the tibion grass. When she found them, she rubs the tooth onto the plant and magically, it became tiny. Sophie returns to the Tooth Fairy to give it to him and obtain a gold coin. With that gold coin, she gave it to Nixie to allow her to pass through. Before leaving, she asked Nixie about the Sandman and she told him that he lives in a tiny castle not too far from here. Sophie told her that she's afraid of the Sandman because of what her mother told her when she was a kid. Nixie reassured her that the Sandman is not as scary as what her mother said. In fact, he's just a normal fairy. Sophie was still skeptical but decided to proceed on. When she finally found the Sandman's house, she was surprised to find that the house is literally small. She wondered how she's going to enter the house when all of a sudden she found a weird looking log which turned her small after she touched it. This is her ticket to enter the house. Using the magical log to turn her body small, she enters the house of the Sandman. Once she's inside, she explores the place, solving puzzles and familiarizing herself with the house. She kept exploring until finally, she arrived on a locked door. Since there's nowhere else she could go, this might be the end of her journey. Or so she thought. As she turns around, the door opened and the Sandman appeared. When Sophie saw the spoon that he's holding, she remembers that her mother used to tell her that the Sandman eats children and scoop out their eyeballs with a spoon. Sophie, upon seeing the spoon and the Sandman's bloodshot eyes, immediately runs away. However, the Sandman managed to capture her and brought her into the dining hall to eat a disgusting meal. Sophie kept refusing the meal even though the dust creature next to her kept insisting that she eat it. Eventually, the Sandman understood that she didn't want to eat any of it, so he left the place. Once the Sandman left, Sophie took a moment before stepping out. She still doesn't know if the Sandman will kill her or not, but for now, it doesn't seem like she's in danger, so she's free to explore the place. As she exits the dining hall, she found a note which she can't read at all. Thinking that it might be important, she decides to keep it. Sophie returns to the room where she encounters the Sandman for the first time and enters it. Inside, there's 2 rooms that she can enter. On the left side, she found another note which again she can't read at all, but decide to take it with her anyway. On the right side, this is where Lullaby lives. The two meet up again and Sophie scolded him for ditching her in the forest. Lullaby apologized, but in his defense, Sophie never mentioned taking her to the Sandman's house directly. She then told Lullaby that she met the Sandman but she runs away from him because he's trying to eat her eyeballs. Lullaby told her that that is silly because the Sandman is not that kind of fairy. He's not a dangerous guy. However, the food is a different story. Lullaby told Sophie that she was right to not eat the food because fairy food is poisonous to human and can kill them. He then advised Sophie to be careful moving around the Sandman's house because there's a lot of deadly trap. Before leaving, Sophie remembers that she picked up 2 unreadable notes. She asked Lullaby what kind of language it is and why can't she understand any of it but can easily understand the other fairies. Lullaby then told her that the note she picked up is from the Sandman himself and he uses his own language. That is why she couldn't understand any of it. He then explained that the 2 notes that she found are instruction on making a sleeping sand and a notice to light the candle using the emerald flame. Since there's nothing left to do here, Sophie continued on and found herself in a hallway with statues spewing flame. She observed its pattern and then carefully moved forward to avoid the flame. It didn't take long for her to reach to the end of the hallway where upon entering, she found the emerald flame. But since she needs a special glove to touch the flame, for now, she used the lever next to the door to turn it off both in this room and in the hallway. Sophie proceeded on where she enters a room with an invisible pathway. She managed to complete that puzzle but was frustrated with how hard it is to move in that situation. Luckily, she wouldn't feel that way for long as in the next room, she found a bottle of red liquid which she poured onto the hidden pathway allowing her to see the path. When she returns to the room, she took note of the 8 jewels stuck onto the door at the end and tries to open the door on the left side when suddenly the Sandman appeared, carrying a bag with him. Sophie thought the Sandman is finally going to kill her, so she runs away. The Sandman saw Sophie runs away, immediately chases after her. Sophie runs back into the emerald flame room and hides in the corner. A few seconds later, the Sandman runs inside the room and since turning off the emerald flame creates a huge hole, the Sandman immediately falls down. Sophie wasted no time and exits the place. She went back to the area where she encountered the Sandman for the second time and enters it. Inside, she can see a huge map of the world. The dust creature explained that the map she's seeing is a map where the Sandman would put the people to sleep. Near the table, she found a strange cracked mirror. The dust creature told her that it's a magic mirror that'll allow her to go anywhere in the house. Since it seemed useful to Sophie, she borrowed the mirror and went on to the next room. She eventually managed to find her way into the tea room where inside, she found Lullaby happily drinking a glass of tea. When she saw Sophie, he asked her to join him for a drink but declined and head on to the next room. In that room, there's a huge statue in the middle and a room that couldn't be opened without a key. Since there's nothing to do here, Sophie decided to explore the other area to find the Sandman, but she soon discovered that the exit door was locked. And not only that, the statue suddenly started singing a lullaby which made Sophie weak and sleepy. In a desperate attempt to not fall asleep, Sophie tried a lot of things such as banging her head on the statue, drenching herself in a bucket of water, screaming on the top of her lung, and playing loud music on her phone, all to distract herself from listening to the statue's lullaby. After what seems like an eternity, the singing slowed down and Sophie slumped to the floor, exhausted to the bone. Lullaby enters and told her that Sophie should have just gone to sleep while listening to the song, but she refuses. She begged him to stop it because she doesn't want to sleep forever. Lullaby snaps his finger and the music stops. Instantly filled with rage, Sophie had enough. She asked Lullaby how she'll be able to stop the Sandman once and for all. Lullaby told her that if she really wants to stop the Sandman, then he knows someone who could help. He told Sophie to go to the lake near the Sandman's house where she can meet someone that'll help her in stopping the Sandman. The Sandman hated that person and it's also the reason why the house is filled with traps. Before leaving, Lullaby warned Sophie to be careful on trusting that person because even though he had a thing for cute little girls, like Sophie, it wouldn't hurt her to be careful. With that in mind, she used the cracked mirror and walked to the entrance of the house. Sophie exited the house and went to the lake near the Sandman's house. There, she met a unicorn who said that he'll help her in stopping the Sandman, but he required a jewel from the Sandman's jewel room. And not just any jewel, but a pink colored jewel. Sophie asked him what happened if she couldn't bring the right jewel, and the unicorn playfully said that he'll stab her with his horn, which isn't a lie because if Sophie did bring the wrong jewel, he will kill her. With that warning in mind, Sophie returns to the house. Immediately after entering, she heard a loud crashing sound in the right room where she found a dust creature, panically asking for Sophie's help with the painting. Sophie tried to lift the painting but couldn't do it as it was heavy. Here, she noticed that the wall had jewels on it. She remembers that there's another set of jewels in the room where she found a bottle with red liquid. She immediately went to that room and rearranged the jewel according to the ones in the painting room. This opens up the door leading into a sand room. Sophie looked around the room and found a stick and a large sack, which is useful later on. As she tried to leave, she heard the Sandman slowly approaching the room. Luckily for Sophie, there's an open closet at the back of the room and she hides in there. The Sandman enters and looked around. He noticed Sophie hiding inside the closet because her hair is sticking out, but decided to leave her all alone. Sophie, still thinking that the Sandman didn't notice her, breathed a sigh of relief until suddenly,
"Hi there, sweetie."
a greenish hand with a long and sharp nail appeared from behind her. This terrified Sophie, who immediately jumped out of the closet. Not wanting to know what that thing is, she exits the room. Sophie returns to the invisible path where she saw a set of stairs blocked by an invisible wall. She touched the wall and realized that it's made of glass. Using the stick that she got earlier, she used it to break the wall and got up the stairs. This took her into the jewel room where she picks up the pink jewel and noticed something is wrong with it since it's not as shining as the other jewel. Sophie went into the room next to it and found a bucket of water. She then washed the jewel because she thought that it looked like that because it's dirty, but what happened afterwards shocked her. The jewel turned out to be a fake one. Had she not paid attention to it, Sophie could have died being stabbed by the unicorn. Luckily for Sophie, in that room, there's a machine that could create jewel. Putting the suction-like object onto her head, the machine creates a shining pink jewel. Now that she got the real jewel, she returns to the unicorn. When she met the unicorn and gave the jewel to him, he was surprised by it but accepted it nonetheless. He then gave Sophie a powerful stone called a limestone. This stone has the ability to make everything it touches weak and fragile. The unicorn told Sophie to go see the dwarf and ask him to modify the stone so that she can use it. Before she leaves, Sophie asked the unicorn if he's keeping the jewel, and the unicorn told her no. He asked if Sophie wanted it back, but Sophie told him to keep it and went on to the dwarf's place. The dwarf lives inside a dark cave, so he asked Sophie to find him a light source, and after she did that, she enters the cave. She was taken aback by the look of the dwarf at first, but then gradually get used to his look. She asked the dwarf to make something that she can use against the Sandman, and he agrees. While he made the weapon, Sophie opens up to him about her whole situation. Here, we learn that Sophie developed a romantic feeling towards David due to him being the first person that is nice to her. But that soon fell apart once she realized that David is already engaged to someone. Feeling heartbroken, she feared waking up and faces what comes tomorrow. This goes on until eventually she developed insomnia. The dwarf patiently listened to her and even comforted her by telling her jokes to lighten her mood. After some time, the dwarf finally finished the weapon. He turned it into a ward to make it easier for Sophie. Before leaving, he gave Sophie some advice and even told her to cherish her father because he's the only family that Sophie had left. Sophie thanked the dwarf and made her way back into the castle. When she returned to the castle, the Sandman appeared right in front of her. He looked at her and for some reason, the Sandman suddenly looked very angry. He immediately stormed out of the house. Sophie was confused why he's acting like that and decided to follow him. The Sandman apparently took the jewel from the unicorn. It looks like he found out about the stolen jewel. Sophie knew she couldn't delay her plan any longer. It's either her or the Sandman. When she returns to the hallway leading to the Emerald Flame, one of the statues fell down, crushing the dust creature beneath it. How it managed to get stuck is something beyond our understanding, but Sophie never questioned that and helped the dust creature instead by lifting the statue using the stick she found earlier. The dust creature thanked her and gave her a translation glasses that is able to read the Sandman's writing. With these glasses, she doesn't need Lullaby anymore to translate any text from the Sandman for her. While exploring the place where the giant map is, Sophie discovered a previously hidden ladder that took her underground. Here, she found an unknown key that unlocks the door behind the singing statue. That room is the sand making room. Before she head there, she needs to gather the materials first. A severed tail taken from a lizard in the kitchen, a snora fruit, and a cry gel taken from a slime in the second floor. With all the ingredient in hand, Sophie went into the sand making room and prepared a special sand using the method listed in the Sandman's note. After a few minutes, she finally made the special sand. Carefully storing it in the sack that she got earlier, she's finally ready. Before confronting the Sandman, she took the glove and went back into the emerald flame room. She used the glove and took the flame with her to light the candle. Once she did that, the floor opens up, leading to the Sandman's room. In this room, Sophie found the Sandman's diary where it reveals the reason why he decided to put everyone to sleep. The Sandman had been doing this for a very long time and wanted a little rest, but the moment he tried to close his eyes, the dust creature would told him to continue working. The Sandman was frustrated and couldn't take it anymore, so he made a special sand that put everyone to sleep. However, some of them have insomnia, so he created lullaby to help them go to sleep. Sophie, upon reading this diary, cried her heart out because she understood the suffering that the Sandman was going through. Not being able to sleep is torture. She asked Lullaby what she should do, and Lullaby told her to follow what she really wanted. Think hard on what she wanted to achieve and follow that. Sophie thought about what she should do. When she went to the place where she met the Sandman for the first time, she found a letter dropped by the Sandman himself. In that letter, the Sandman expressed how he wanted to help her sleep, so he had prepared a special sand for her and is now waiting on the top of the castle. After reading that letter, Sophie knew exactly what she wanted to do. She met the Sandman and told him that she understood what he's going through, but she doesn't want to sleep forever, so she's going to fight for it. Sophie pulled out the wand and the two of them battled it out. His attack damages Sophie greatly, and sometimes he can even hit her even if she's out of reach. But through sheer determination, Sophie managed to win the fight. Sophie quickly threw the special sand that she had made before to make the Sandman fall asleep. As the Sandman fell asleep, Sophie gradually began to feel weak and sleepy. She promises that if she woke up the next day, she won't back down anymore. She will stand up to her bully, told Anne the truth, even try to be nice to her father and be friends with David. As Sophie gradually closes her eyes, Lullaby transforms into her mother's form and stays with Sophie until she fell asleep, ending her 10 days of insomnia. In the epilogue, the Sandman woke up after some time and carried Sophie back into her bed. He then resumes the clock, allowing people to wake up from their sleep. The next morning, Sophie woke up feeling refreshed. She's finally cured of her insomnia. True to her words, she did everything that she promised she would do. She got back at Reagan and won't allow her to bully her anymore. She scolded Anne for being a coward and a liar. She even managed to patch things up with her father and be friends with David and his fiancée. Finally moving on from him and accepting her unrequited love. As the three of them meet up to eat somewhere, Sophie looked back and gave a peace sign to the Sandman, who's watching her through a telescope. So after completing the game, there's an extra mode unlocked where you play as the Sandman and see what happened through his point of view. It gave us more backstory on why did the Sandman decide to put people to sleep forever. You also see here that the Sandman doesn't want to harm anyone. He just wanted to put the people to sleep so that he can get a little bit of rest. But in the end, after Sophie defeats him, he realized that he became the Sandman because he liked seeing the faces of people waking up in the morning. And for some weird reason, the good ending of this game is him falling in love in Sophie. Now at some point in the game, Sophie offered her pink jewel to the unicorn and this made the Sandman angry. But we didn't know the context why he was angry until we saw the scene in his point of view. So to understand why, we need to understand what does the jewel signifies. The notes on the jewel room reveals that these jewels were actually part of human souls. Each color represents what emotions the human had and pink represents love. The reason why the Sandman was angry was because he saw the pink jewel disappeared from her soul. The moment Sophie decided to give her pink jewel away, she loses all form of love. Since he's only borrowing these souls for research, seeing it disappear from a human and be taken away by someone, that is not something that the Sandman would ever do. So he snapped and beat the unicorn. However, that doesn't mean that Sophie loses all her love for her family as well. She still had them, she still cared for them. It doesn't affect her love for her family. What's affected her was her love for David. Since she gave her pink jewel, that's basically saying that she's giving up her love on him, which is why when you see Lullaby again in the Sandman's room, he doesn't have any form. Sophie no longer have any feelings for David. So the Sandman has 6 endings, 4 in the main game and 2 in the extra ending. We already got the true ending in the video, so I want to talk about the bad ending for the main game instead because one of them contains a spoiler for the next game. The first bad ending is called Queen of the Night, and it's probably one of the most unexpected ending ever. You get this ending by giving the jewel to the unicorn and then killing the Sandman. Sophie will slump down and started apologizing that she didn't mean to kill the Sandman. It goes on for a while until eventually she blamed the Sandman for the mistake and refuses to take accountability. In the end, we got a shot of her becoming the ruler of the night. She even wore dark dresses and took over the Sandman's work without doing the actual work. You know, looking over the telescope and admiring her work, admiring the people that fell asleep forever in the dark, dark night. It's kind of unexpected how it happened. I didn't expect her to become an evil character. That's a character development there. The second bad ending is called Sleep with One Eye Open. This ending sort of introduced the boogeyman at the end. You get this bad ending when you take the jewel and then kill the Sandman. In this ending, Sophie concludes that the only way for things to return to normal was to kill the Sandman. Well, she killed him and things didn't change. It got even worse when she got back because now she's trapped inside a world that doesn't move and will stay night forever. In the end, her closets open, a sign that the boogeyman had come. Lastly, the third bad ending is called Invisible Sweetheart. You get this ending after taking the jewel from the unicorn and putting the Sandman to sleep. Here, Sophie decides to stay in the Sandman's world and become a glimmer. If you ever wondered what exactly are glimmer, or if you haven't paid attention to the story of the game, well, Sophie just showed that to us and it's by far one of the most depressing ending ever. As for the extra mode, the bad ending is pretty straightforward. The Sandman put Sophie to sleep forever, but instead of being happy, Sophie was suffering a nightmare. It wouldn't be a problem if she could wake up the next day, but the Sandman put her to sleep forever, so she's basically trapped and is forced to relive whatever nightmare that she's having there. And that's the Sandman, everyone. A really interesting game from Uri. I want to thank everybody who watches my video. It took me a while to make this because I got sick for a few days. I still am, but the show must go on. Anyways, thank you for watching this video. Like this video if you enjoyed it, subscribe, turn on the bell so you won't miss anything, and check out my previous video. That's all. Thank you and see you next time.